gentlemen, this next track is called The Mistress of the Dark. Straight out of Texas, allow me to introduce to you Ghoultown.
Hey man, check it out, dude. We're back.
We're back
on .com with another interview. Before that, man, did you guys know that Jarek and I host a little TV show called The Adventure Begins that drops every Thursday on certain social media platforms and on Roku for me and for you?
Yep. We do cool stuff such as talk about comics that are coming out. We unbox games, talk about nerd news and some not so nerdy news. And we also funny skits, at least we think we're funny, and jokes. So make sure to check us out every Thursday on certain social media platforms and on Roku for me and for you.
That's right, man. So our next guest I've known and I've been a big fan of for a very long time. He's a horror fanatic, the frontman for the Texas horror rockabilly kick-ass band called Ghoultown. He's an author working on a 6th book, and you can see him on various TV shows streaming on Amazon, Discovery, Animal Planet, CBS. I can go on and on forever, but we only got a short period of time, man. Please put your woof woofs and your voodoo dolls down and help me welcome my friend Lyle Blackburn. What's up, man?
Guys? Not much. Good to be on.
Heck yeah, dude! I'm excited.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very excited. So, to the viewers out there, I've got my eyeballs on all the different social media platforms. So, if you have a question for Lyle, or just ask away, and if we got some time, maybe we'll read it live. So, and all that jazz, man. We just watched Ghoultown's Elvira video. So, who doesn't love Elvira? I think everybody. Can you tell us the story behind how all that came together?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously that was a dream come true, being a horror kid, and having, grown up with Elvira, and having infatuation with her, as we probably all did. Even now, she's just such a beautiful girl and amazing personality. But we were doing an acoustic set, Ghoultown was, at a horror convention several years ago. Because they didn't really have the whole band thing, but they had a VIP party, and they wanted us to do a little acoustic thing. So we did that, and it just so happened that she was a guest there, and her manager was at the party. She didn't actually see us, but he was so impressed, even with the acoustic thing, that the next day I was, near our table, but I was talking to somebody else and filmmakers over there, and then somebody came over and said, "Hey, man, you got to go to your table because Elvira wants to meet you." I'm like, oh, no, come on, man. No, serious. So I go, okay, whatever. So I go over there, and sure enough, here she struts over with her manager and was like, "I heard you guys are really good. I wanted to see what you're about, and, talk to us for a minute." And we just it was just sort of like, "Wow, you guys should, we should work together, write a song or something." And I said, "Well, I could do that for sure because I'm a fan, and let's do it." So I talked to her manager, and we ended up, I submitted a demo of a song. They liked it. So we recorded the song, and we thought it was really cool. So we arranged to do a video, and we went out to Hollywood and actually filmed at a place called the Magic Castle, which is this famous place where magicians have performed over time, and a really cool venue. And she brought the car, and we shot the video, and just an amazing experience. So for me, it's like certainly a high point for what we've done with Ghoultown, and the fans have always loved it, and it's a connection to Elvira that we've had ever since.
That's awesome.
That is so cool. I love that video. It's just I just watched the Mistress her movie Mistress of the Dark the other day.
Oh yeah.
It's just so cool and campy, and she's so much fun. Before we jump into everything you've got going on here in the present, let's go back a little bit. Tell us about what brought on your love for horror.
Man, it was just something in my blood. You don't really realize it at first, but when I was a kid, I just gravitated towards monsters and things, and you would see things on TV, and you would want to watch those, and whether your parents would let you or not. Early on it was a challenge, and when I was young, I remember watching a show called Dark Shadows, which was an old TV serial, like a soap opera that came on in the day before Batman, the TV show, did. And I had no idea what the plot was or anything, but I knew those vampires and werewolves, and it was spooky, and those ghosts. I just loved it. And then my dad would tell me, "Well, man, if you like that," he would describe movies that he had seen in the theater that I had yet to see, like Frankenstein, A Creature from the Black Lagoon. And I think that kind of sparked or fed into that. And then I just loved it ever since. Anything horror. I love, horror movies, collecting stuff, as you see in the background, books, just all of it for my whole life.
Do you have a particular classic monster that is your all-time favorite?
I would say The Creature from the Black Lagoon. It's hard to choose. I mean, I love werewolves and Wolfman, and I love Frankenstein's monster, but I always thought Creature was very cool, and as a collector of that kind of memorabilia, they didn't always make the Creature, so he's a little more collectible and a little more rare sometimes, and he's just a green swamp monster, and that's like every Scooby-Doo episode, every kid just loves Swamp Monster. So for me, that was my big one.
Very cool. At Bloods Bunny. I love it. At Bloods Bunny asks, you seem to have a really cool collection. Is it all genres of monsters, or is it a particular type?
primarily Universal Monsters. You know, there's other things in here. And at one time, I love other stuff. I have a kind of a section with Michael Myers Halloween. And as an extension of the books I write on mysterious monsters, I have cryptozoology stuff and some Bigfoot things. But primarily, it's Universal Monsters. And that's because that's kind of what I had collected, some of it when I was a kid, and just those iconic, you know, the iconic monsters were where I started. And then I started collecting other stuff, but eventually so much came out, and there's only so much space. So I kind of tried to narrow to a theme and just decided the Universal Monsters are cool. And you can also collect stuff going back to, you know, like the 1960s, whereas if you're trying to collect Michael Myers, you know, you're more forward. So it's kind of cool in a collectible sense because there's older stuff to be had with those. So primarily, and if you go onto my Lyle Blackburn YouTube channel, I just put a tour of my whole room on there, so you could actually see the whole thing.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, I'd definitely be checking that out. I'm sure you're getting some views, some clicks. Well, obviously you're a musician. Who was the person that made you want to pick up a guitar and be like, you know what, I want to start a band? Influences.
You know, it was just sort of a culmination, I think. I try to always look back and to say, was there one pivotal group or performer? And I think it was just something I wanted to do, and at all costs, because I remember begging for a guitar when I was in elementary school. My parents tried to make me play piano and then all that. You know, I wanted to be in a band. You know, I was listening to whatever, you know, radio rock and the Cars and any kind of, I just loved the idea of being in a band almost more than playing an instrument. It was like, dude, that's awesome because it's a group of dudes. It's like your own vibe. Being in a band would be cool. So that's kind of where I was going with it, just wanting to be in a band. So then I tricked him by auditioning for the school marching band or something, and I got drums, which that was the baby step into being in a punk rock band, which I ended up in shortly thereafter once I got a drum set. And then I switched to guitar because I became the songwriter. I was looking, you know, I kind of was the leader, and of course it moved me towards songwriting. So at that point I need to learn how to play guitar. And by then, of course, I could buy my own guitar. And so I've actually played every instrument in various bands, and then just ended up as the guitarist and the vocalist just because I'm the leader, I guess.
Well, that leads us to, you know, 1999, Ghoultown. It's a very interesting concept. I mean, you don't turn on. I mean, back then you didn't turn on like MTV or anything and see a Ghoultown band. You saw mainstream. How did this concept come together?
I had always kind of wanted to do something that was iconic and unique. You know, I mean, early on, you know, I'd done horror punk bands, and you know, you aspire to kind of the Misfits was a template. And then I did a band called Solitude Eternus. For a while, we were doom metal. So, you know, there's a certain vibe, and you kind of lump into these categories. But I thought, how do you create something that's visible, you know, like the Ramones or the Misfits, where people can just look at you and say, whether they like you or not, you identify as a certain group. And at some point I was working, I'm also a writer, so I was working on a comic book that was like this post-apocalyptic vampire Western, and I had this saloon and I had this band in there called Ghoultown. And as it went, I thought, man, that would be a cool band. And so then it just sort of became, well, forget the comic thing. Let me make the actual band. So I did. And then once we got the black hat thing, I played in my Texas roots with the horror and the spaghetti Western, everything else I loved. Metal, you know, sort of a Johnny Cash Ghost Riders in the Sky was almost the template in my mind, but more of a little bit more amped up version, you know, and just that sort of imagery in my mind created Ghoultown, and we just kind of made up the music along, because there's nobody, you know, people go, what does your band sound like? I'm like, Ghoultown, I don't know.
Well,
awesome.
I've been to several shows, and I've got all the albums, and I can tell you what, man, you guys put on one hell of a stage show. You look great. And with that being said, at Glimmer Butcher 148 asks, do you still hang yourself on stage And have you ever had any close calls?
Yes. Yes and no. The hanging thing is difficult, obviously, and it requires to do the production. You need a stage with a curtain because you have to set it up. There's some prep, and I start the show literally hanging from the neck, and then the bass player shoots me down like the old Good and the Bad and the Ugly Western, where he's shooting the ugly off of the rope. So it's hard to do unless the club has the setup and we have the time to get there and do it. So it's something I don't do at every show, and it's also difficult. The first time we ever did it was the close call because I didn't really have I think at that time I didn't have it where he could shoot me down. There was a mechanism and all this where I get shot and the rope breaks. Well, the original idea was to lower me down. That was what we had. And I'm hanging up there, and I didn't quite have the whole thing adjusted. And it's too much onto my neck. And I'm hanging, and our roadie's got this big, he's holding the rope, and I had no real way to tell him to put me down because I didn't want to come out of the character. So I'm hanging there suffocating like,
oh my God.
And it was a total fiasco, and it didn't come off as good as, of course, later when the shooting me down off the rope. But by the time, they could finally figure it out, like, I'm like, let me down, idiot. Let me down. Well, by then, dude, now I got to sing an entire show. So I was totally, like almost died. And now I got to perform at my maximum, but I pulled it off and we refined it, and I survived to this day.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. We'll continue to talk about Ghoultown, but Richard online says the comic book that you described sounds really cool. Did it ever get published?
It actually did, sort of, mostly. As you know, shortly after the band started playing, I was at a show, and a comic book artist and comic book independent producer, which is your cousin,
my uncle.
Your uncle, yeah.
Yeah, he's on next, by the way.
Oh, okay. Well, he's coming up next. So Flynn Prejean comes up and says, "Man, I love your band." And we got to talking, and I'd mentioned the comic book. He says he's a comic book artist, and he's like, "Well, man, we've been putting out this comic called Texas Asylum." So he did a Ghoultown comic. Unfortunately, there was only like a preliminary preview story in one of the Texas Asylum, and then we did 2 issues of Ghoultown before there was sort of this dropout in the independent comic world, and his partner left. So it was a 4-issue miniseries in which only 2 of them came out. So and then beyond that, the band started getting bigger, and it was just too much for me then to try to pursue a comic book. And without Flynn, I couldn't do it on my own because he was really, even though I wrote it and that was the ideas, he's driving that with the characters, the art. So unfortunately, it just never happened. And I did try to shop it to Dark Horse and some of the others, but nobody ever really bit on it. So,
Well, Richard, I've got a ton of those books. So I'll come by the shop sometime. They might even be signed by Flynn and Lyle, probably.
Hey.
Back to Ghoultown. Let's see. Killer in Texas is probably one of your biggest songs to date, and it's one of your earliest songs off your first album, right? But you've dropped a brand new single here just a couple of days ago, Where Voodoo Sleeps. And again, man, I've been jamming this tune. It is awesome. Where can our viewers find it? And there's something special that you're doing for a limited time with this song, correct?
Right. Yeah, we just dropped this single, and it was sort of one it was a song that was originally going to go on our upcoming new album. But it had a really cool, unique vibe to it, and it was kind of a cool song. So we decided to release it as a single, and we just dropped it on Friday, and sort of as a special thing, thanks to our fans, and just sort of something to kind of contribute to this situation we've got going on in the world, where people are at home. They need, you got to entertain yourself and we can't go to gigs and all that, we decided to offer the single for free. You can download it absolutely free. So if you go to our Bandcamp profile, which is at bandcamp.com, you can look on Ghoultown. You can just download the single right there for free for the next 7 days. So you can check it out and, get a taste of Ghoultown without any commitment.
Yeah, I've downloaded it, and everybody download it, all of you. Ghoultown's currently in the studio working on the brand new album, but there's a little surprise there as well, right? You guys had to stop recording for a bit because of this COVID craziness.
Yeah, when the zombie plague sort of interrupted our progress. I mean, we had the last practice, and then we were headed to the studio, and that's when in our area of Texas, they put the lockdown on businesses and stuff. And obviously it was a time where, you did want to kind of stay home and just assess the situation so that we can get this under control. So literally interrupted our flow there because 3 days before we were supposed to go in was when the lockdown happened. So that delayed us, but we're rescheduling and, still operating under, cautious and social distancing type things, but getting with our producer and starting to record some of the tracks. So it kind of delays the album, but we don't ever rush anything because we just want to make a good album. There's no time frame, nobody's telling us when or where to do it. So hopefully we're looking at a fall release at this point, which only set us back. We were going to release this summer, but maybe fall.
Very cool, man. Well, I'm excited. Can't wait. So not only do you write great tunes, you write great books as well. You're an author, and hey, man.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah, so you've done stuff such as, Momo, The Strange Case of the Missouri Monster, The Beast of Boggy Creek. You have a new one coming out here, Sinister Swamps, Monsters and Mysteries from the Mire. Can you tell us more about what's in there?
Yeah, the new book, I always had a fascination not only for horror, but for, stories of alleged real life monsters, anything, lake monsters, Bigfoot, Yeti, even weirder stuff, lizard men. I mean, literally creature from the Black Lagoons being reported in modern times. And whether the creatures were real or not real, the phenomenon of people literally believing they had an encounter with what we would describe as a monster basically was always fascinating to me. So my new book, Sinister Swamps, instead of focusing on maybe one certain type of creature or a certain case where there was a lot of sightings or some hubbub about that, I decided to cover geographic locations and some of my favorites, which are swamps. The swamps are full of weird stories, weird encounters, phenomenon ranging not only from monsters or cryptids to ghostly encounters, tales of witches, missing persons, people disappear of strange circumstances, lost villages, lost tribes, legends. Anywhere I went that involved the swamp, I just seemed to have this unusual amount of, phenomenon. So in my books, I try to go to the places. I don't just Google this stuff. I've been to these swamps. I've been deep inside, Honey Island Swamp and Okefenokee Swamp and a number of these around the U.S. So it took me about 10 years to collect all these reports and kind of experiences that go into this book. But it's sort of a trip into, like every Scooby-Doo episode. Where did they put the monster? Where was the haunted house located? Right next to a swamp, because there's just something creepy about those places. So I was able to cover a vast array of phenomenon in this, with ghostly encounters and things I haven't really had the opportunity before, but just in my mind, the spookiest of the spooky, because this is a setting that just oozes with creepy stories and legends. So this is a book I've been working on for a while.
So do you find yourself mostly in the southern U.S. or are you traveling across the entire continent?
It's primarily in the South because, being in Texas and trying to, total Indiana Jones these places where I go there and offer the reader some observations. it's more economically feasible or whatever. But I've been to, I've been up to where the Mothman has been sighted in West Virginia, so up in there, and I do cover some swamps like the Great Dismal Swamp and even Hockomock Swamp in Massachusetts on this one. But it's primarily in the South, and part of that's just because I love the vibe of the South. Like there's so many legends and stories and creepy stuff here that if you talk to your grandma or great grandma, they could tell you some weird stuff, and when it has that Southern vibe, I think that's the coolest and kind of fits my my fascination level of this, and so it's a lot of it's in the South.
So there's something cool about supernatural and like that frontiers vibe. There's like really cool mix, and it comes through in these stories as well as honestly just the music of Ghoultown. So yeah.
So it works a little bit together, although people ask if I'm gonna, man, are you ever gonna do like a Bigfoot song for Ghoultown? And it never quite comes up. I've toyed with some Beast of Boggy Creek or type, but it never quite comes across right. So Ghoultown is often sort of the dark Western thing, and then over here I'm a monster hunter. So it's almost
totally
two things.
We've got a question at Dirk_Diggler. He asks, have you ever experienced something yourself? And I guess he's pertaining to anything supernatural. Have you ever experienced one of these ghost stories in real life?
Yeah, there's been a few things. Ironically, I've seen a ghost, or what I would, what anybody would describe as a ghost, sort of a ghostly whitish figure at the house. This was many years ago at a house that one of my friends lived at, and his parents and several of my friends had seen it, and I didn't know whether I believed them or not or what, but then I literally saw that, and then I was like, wow, I was already fascinated with that stuff, so it didn't change my life other than okay, cool. That I can't say that was a dead person or whatever, but I saw that, what people would describe as a ghost. And then in terms of, Bigfoot and other kind of monsters, I've spent a lot of my time hunting, and my dad was a bow hunter, so we spent a lot of time in the woods. I never really seen anything myself, but in recent years, I have experienced some really weird close calls, which could have been related to some unknown creature. I was in a place in near Boggy Creek in Arkansas once, where this thing was howling at us and followed us down this bayou channel and came up near our camp and was howling. And I just bailed right down this hill trying to look at it with a flashlight. Whatever it was ran off. I never could see it. Similar type thing when I was in the Ocala National Forest in Florida, where there's a lot of reports of what people describe as skunk apes, these sort of more apish kind of Bigfoot type creatures. And again, it was something, we were in the middle of nowhere and somebody was beating on a can. When I say somebody, no person was out there. And I pursued this as well into the woods, and it would just one step ahead of me. Whatever it was running, never could get a visual on it. But those get your energy up and provide a good rush and kind of fuel the fire to continue this crazy pursuit of going into woods and swamps in search of monsters.
Totally.
You keep chasing after these things, they're gonna end up eating you, dude. You're gonna end up.
You got to run down the good story, and I guess, I don't know, if I die, who's going to tell my story? That's a problem. But at least I, went out. If I disappear in the woods, then people go, man, that's something happened. That's cool. So
yeah,
all good.
So do you have a with all the research you've done with your books, and even for looking at the TV shows, do you have a favorite story or case that it tops everything else?
There's a number of them, certainly. And I think the one that fascinate me the most is where I have a witness that I just simply cannot find another explanation beyond they saw something completely unexplainable. And my sort of top witness, or the one where if only this guy saw what is an unknown creature, then they exist, you know, even if all the other people saw a shadow. But in this case, he was out in this rural area of Arkansas fishing. He was on a pond, and the sun was starting to go down, so he'd been very quiet out there. You know, when you're fishing, you're not making a lot of movements and stuff. You're quiet. And he'd heard something walking around the pond, but didn't quite, you know, thought, well, it's a deer, or maybe a cow is running loose out here. It sounded big, but then suddenly he paddled around a little area and was sitting there fishing, and he hears just bipedal footsteps coming up and crossed up this on this little overhang that looks down on that pond. And he looks up, and he's only about 60 feet from it, and he sees this big hair-covered thing walking on two legs that looked, you know, ape-like, yet walked like a man. And he said it was probably like 6.5 or 7 feet tall. It was kind of hunched over. It had long arms. And he said it never saw him. It just, you know, because he's just sitting down there quiet on that pond, and the sun's going down. And he watched it walk up over that bank and disappear. And of course, the hair stands up on the back of his neck, and he's like, you know, what do you think when you see something like that? And it was so far out, it's like it's not a guy in a costume. And besides that, he's 60 feet away. You can tell a costume from an animal or something that's more real. And you know, eventually he paddled to the bank and just got out and took off running.
Yeah.
Just hightailed it out of there. And he met his father up the road, and they both came down there with a flashlight and looked around. And I mean, he was in such a panic, and I've talked to his father as well. You know, his father had brought a 38 down there, you know, just to kind of ease his, you know, let's go look. But they didn't see any sign of it. But this is a very credible witness, and somebody I can stake my reputation that's not lying or making it up. He simply has no explanation for it other than some kind of ape-like thing walked across those woods in front of him. And it's just like, wow, I kind of want to see that myself.
Totally. So how does the average Joe get into this kind of stuff? Like, you know, is it as simple as, you know, finding reports of this stuff, grabbing a camera and going, or is it more than that?
Well, it's a lot easier now. I mean, when I started doing this more than a decade ago, you know, there weren't so many groups or people doing it. I think since then there's been a lot of shows like Finding Bigfoot on Animal Planet and things like that have sort of given people a template for doing this. And there's so groups on Bigfoot, from, you know, mostly Bigfoot hunters in every state. Just in these groups, if you can find one that's, you know, got some integrity and some you know, cool guys in it, you know, that's a good way just to reach out and to say, hey, you know, you guys take me out and show me some areas or whatever. And so you can kind of get somebody who's done it before to do it. I mean, certainly you could just research this on the internet and find a place near your home that has a history of sighting reports, read about them. You might even see a name of a creek or a county where you live and go, wow, I could go up there to that wildlife management area and go out there. I mean, if you're brave enough, just go out there yourself, camp, you know, who knows, you might see something.
Interesting.
We got a question, an online question from Rich. Do you find those shows help or hurt?
That's a good question. I think both, because initially, you know, people are reluctant to say they've seen something strange because they don't want to be laughed at. And a lot of times they don't realize how many people have seen weird stuff that can't be explained. They're not the only one. But, you know, when you tell your friends and family and people chuckle, what were you drinking? You know, these people are serious, and they've had this experience, so they don't want the ridicule. So the shows, however, have shown real people telling about their experiences, so people realize that, wait, I'm not the only one. And Bigfoot has gotten more, I don't know if it's more popular, but people more accept that there's some phenomenon about that going on, whether it's Bigfoot or lake monsters, chupacabra, that this is just something going on, and you can't be too afraid to say, hey, I saw something. It's you know, people aren't going to think you're crazy like they did back then. So it's allowed more people will come forward and give their reports. However, it creates this sort of fever of like everybody's running in the woods and, well, that was a Bigfoot. There's a shadow. Oh, it's a Bigfoot. To where it creates white noise because you have to filter out those are kind of going in the woods with the intention, I'm going to see Bigfoot, and then suddenly they do. It's like, don't work that way. It's like, I like the old lady who's driving up some old road and sees something she doesn't want to see. She's not looking for Bigfoot. She just simply is in the, well, what I consider the right place at the right time, but to her, the wrong place, you know.
Yeah.
Those are the witnesses I like best. But, you know, so those shows are okay. And some of them are more authentic than others. I mean, you got to watch out for TV. Not everything you see on TV is real. So some of the shows, you know, Monster Quest and Finding Bigfoot, some are very good. The show was on Monsters and Mysteries in America. That was, you know, we had real witnesses. Those people were not making that stuff up. But you've got some shows that are, you know, embellishing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That makes
Well,
sense.
I mean, yeah, so a musician, author, and adding something else to your resume, a TV personality. So apparently you have discovered how to stop time because you're doing all of this. How do you do all of this?
Yeah.
Where do you find the time? Your schedule's crazy, sir.
Yeah, it is kind of ridiculous, and I kind of just work all the time. I mean, I don't, you know, like, what do you do in your spare time? I'm like, what spare time? But the cool thing is I never considered this any kind of work. I mean, it's just fun. So it's fun to do. So I have to use a lot of my time to do it. And I have to do a lot of juggling. I can't, I can't just go on tour with Ghoultown, because I've got this other stuff lined up. And, you know, the cool thing about it is I can do the kind of bands that I want to. I can do the kind of band and write the kind of books I want. Nobody tells me what to do. But, Ghoultown isn't if I was trying to make a band that was going to be universally appealable to everybody, I probably wouldn't do Ghoultown. But I can do it because, I also write books and do this other stuff. So it all feels it all feels into the same thing, allowing me to do cool stuff without anybody telling me what kinds of things or any kind of schedule. Ghoultown just comes out with an album when we do it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's definitely delays. I just can't. I'm constantly juggling time.
It's understandable, man. On Amazon Prime, you've got a pretty big catalog, especially with the series called Small Town Monsters. What exactly is your involvement with that show, and what can people expect from watching it? Is it similar to what you write?
Yeah, very much. Small Town Monsters is a film company out of Ohio, and I met the director and head guy, Seth Breedlove, several years ago, and we had sort of bonded on our mutual love for these small town monster cases. And these would be the ones where there would be several sightings of some sort of a creature near a certain small rural town in America, and it would just literally change that town. Tourists would come in there, or the locals, like in Fouke, Arkansas, where Boggy Creek and Legend of Boggy Creek, those kind of things. And his third film, these are documentaries that just sort of analyze the phenomenon about a certain case or creature, and there's first-person witnesses, 100% real witnesses telling what they saw, and sort of an overview of the story. So the third movie he did was Boggy Creek Monster, and as the guy who'd written a book on that and so forth, he wanted me involved. So I ended up helping with the research. I'm in the movie, and I also narrated the movie. Well, I've done vocals and stuff, and the narration people liked it. So he thought, well, this is great. So then I started narrating the other films. But following that, we did one on the Mothman, and Mothman's a very popular cryptid creature, sort of monster, sort of paranormal type of deal. And so I just simply narrated that one. So you hear my voice, and then other ones I've either narrated, or one of the newer ones, Momo the Missouri Monster, I am on screen as sort of the host. Like I literally deliver the narration on site, with me on screen. So, it's just each film is unique, but it's a perfect way for people who may or may not know much about these subjects to just watch and get a really good overview of the story and hear some of those witnesses telling about their encounters without any network TV involvement, no bias, we're not selling you on anything other than here's the weird story, make of it what you will. So yeah, definitely go on there and watch those because hey, we're all quarantined, right?
Yeah. We've got an online question. As a kid, did you watch In Search of the Leonard? He said Leonard Nimoy scared me weekly.
Absolutely, I loved that show, and I was pretty young, but I remember, staying up late to watch it, and I was always scared when it was over. My parents were asleep by then, and I was scared to go down the hall to my bedroom. I was like, man, if I just get the bedroom, man, because they covered Bigfoot and witches and all kinds of weird stuff, ghosts, and yeah, it scared me. And in fact, when I did the small town movie Momo, the Missouri Monster, where I'm on screen, I'm literally trying to channel my Leonard Nimoy In Search of vibe.
That's awesome.
Because I'm like, he just did that so great that I did do my best to kind of give that In Search of vibe.
Very
really cool.
Let's see, man. You've got a lot of upcoming appearances. Where are you going to be? Let people know.
The next one, if it goes down still, some of the spring ones are obviously canceled, but there's the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Conference in Gatlinburg, Tennessee on July 25th. And that will, if things resume, that'll be the next one. They did one last year and like thousands of people showed up. I mean, the first time. So they wanted to have another one. So they're bringing me out there as one of the speakers. August the 1st, there's the second annual Fouke Monster Festival, which is the Boggy Creek Monster thing in southern Arkansas in Fouke. Another popular event that went on last year. And then there's a whole string of them in September. I'll be at Texas Frightmare Weekend, which is a big horror convention here that's usually in May, but they're going to do it in September. So I'll be at that. And a number of places, Mothman Festival in Virginia, some other Bigfoot conferences, and I'm doing kind of a library event tour in Missouri as part of my Missouri Monster book. So yeah, just if people go to lyleblackburn.com, you can see if I'm coming to any place in your area.
Right on, man. Well, we'll put your web address in the comments because this video is recorded, so it's just going to stay up on the site. And we'll put the Ghoultown Where Voodoo Sleeps link on there as well. Sweet. Cool, man. We've got one last question for you, and it's a question that Jarek and I will indulge in on a later show of The Adventure Begins. And I know that sounds weird, but this is it. Go ahead, man.
So this is a 100% serious question. Like I said, we will indulge in this. Let's say you walk into a deli, right? You look up on the menu saying, hey, what do I want? You're like, oh, hey, look, it's the Lyle Blackburn. What exactly would be on that sandwich? The plan is, like I said, we want to get this down, and if it's not something extremely weird like drumstick shavings, chocolate sauce, and sardines, we'll definitely try it out and give a review.
Right. Oh man, that's a good question. I guess Texas, it's got to have some barbecue sauce on it. I mean, that's a given. Some spicy pickles. It needs I don't know, your choice of, I'll go with vegetarians could have some tofu or your meat of your choice. It needs some zesty cheese, some jack cheddar, something like that. It needs mustard. We don't do mayo, so you want to do that here in Texas. We do spicy mustard, so dripping of spicy mustard. Some good thick whole grain bread. And what can we top that off with? I'm gonna think. It could have this little toothpick thing with a cowboy hat, like a small cowboy hat. It's definitely somehow you gotta the hat sitting on top, so people look and they go, "Oh, dude, he's got a Blackburn. I should have got that." It's dripping with barbecue sauce and mustard, and you get extra napkins, of course. But I don't know. That sounds like my vibe of a sandwich.
That sounds awesome.
That sounds delicious, and we will definitely be trying it on a future episode of The Adventure Begins, man. Lyle, thank you so much, my friend, for hanging out with us. Maybe we can have you on a future episode as soon as all your new stuff comes out. Cheers to all the success you got coming your way. Our next interview will be at 4 p.m. with Bad Moon Studios owner and gig poster artist Flynn Prejean. QuarantineCon is still in full swing, so click the link in the description to check it out for free. That's $0. And don't forget to visit The Adventure Begins Facebook, Instagram, and website for all the upcoming events, as well as all of these interviews. Lyle, you rock, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Do you guys have any D&D stuff? I hate busy days. So something that really bothers me about Star Wars is that the Ewoks don't really get the appreciation I think they deserve. A lot of people say that they're the teddy bears of the Star Wars universe, but in actuality, when you look at other fictional teddy bears, they seem to get a lot more respect. So like Ted from Seth MacFarlane's popular movie series, Ted, he gets a lot more respect than the Ewoks or Teddy
Star Wars.
Ruxpin. He's another cartoon character from the popular TV show.
Did you ask for
Teddy
this?
Ruxpin, also a popular doll.
Nope.
He gets more respect than the Ewok. So, what are your favorite Star Wars characters?
Boba Fett, Darth Vader.
Those characters are trash. Have you considered a more plausible character like Greedo? Even though he doesn't get a whole lot of screen time, I think he's very.
This is not the conversation I was looking for.
Plot device. If you look into
Try the mind trick?
expanded lore, especially
No.
going into some of the
Try the Jedi mind trick
very
then.
hardworking.
This is not the conversation I was looking for.
That's not how it goes. Are you even a fanboy? Okay, they were looking for droids like R2-D2, not conversations. Why don't you try watching the movies again before you try the
how did this start?
incorrectly?
The light went out, so I asked Bill for another light bulb. He asked ceiling or energy efficient. I said lightsaber.
Calling the teddy bear, this is not fair. Have you ever seen a teddy bear use a light to destroy?
Lightsaber, can you grab me a bulb?
Which kind?
Lightsaber.
So I think the Ewoks are some of the most...
No!